Welcome to The Decision from Nashville EO, where you will hear the rest of the story after tough decisions were made by entrepreneurs who faced adversity and lived to tell about it.
Hi, Robert Hartline here with The Decision, brought to you by EO Nashville. I have a special guest. Again, my name is Robert Hartline. Eric Jackson, my co-host, a man with a plan, a partner in crime, to share stories of entrepreneurs who have been through interesting challenges. But our guest today is even more special than that, because it is the godfather here of EO Nashville, Mr. Bill Kimberlin, here with us in the flesh.
Thank you.
He is the reason we are here as a group, as a community of 324 beautiful entrepreneurs that are just doing something right on this earth. Bill, how many years have you been a member?
October of 1993.
October?
No, 97. I'm sorry. Yeah, October of 1997.
97.
I forget. No, 93.
When do you get old?
93. God, I forget. It's been
Is it 93?
30 years? Almost?
30 years.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. Golly.
Wow.
And you don't look...
That's actually, yeah, because I
You joined when you were
right.
10, right?
I was, I was
12?
26.
Okay,
27.
gotcha.
Just before we get into your story, can you take us back? What was the deciding factor for you to start this?
Well, somebody told me I was an entrepreneur. I didn't even know what it was. And so I had, let's say, back then when I was, I was pretty impatient. I had 3 companies by my junior year of college, and I was pretty impatient. I didn't want to wait for somebody to give me a job, so I just worked while I was in school. And then after many failed attempts, my sophomore year probably, I had a company hit pretty fast, and that put me into two other projects. And I didn't really know anybody else that owned a business, and I was trying really hard to find community. And so looking for that community, really, there just wasn't. Everybody was giving me advice was, son, work in an industry for 8 years and then go start a business. That's the way you do it. And I was not patient enough for that. So I ended up meeting a YPO member. They told me about YPO, Young Presidents Organization, and their requirements were a bit more steep than what EO was. So they introduced me. Actually, it was Henry Hillenmeyer of the local chapter here in Nashville told me about a group called YEO. Back then, it was called Young Entrepreneurs Organization. And so they put me in touch, and I called them up, and they said, we've got, at that time, almost 600 members internationally. And members were, a lot of interesting people. But I said, well, what does it take to start a chapter? Or are you guys coming to Nashville? And they said, we need a volunteer. And I said, oh, and they said, we'll give you $1,000 marketing budget to launch. So that's what happened. They gave me $1,000, and I used that to have a meeting down at the Stover Hotel at that time. And we had, I think, 6 people join, and that became the board, that became the chapter, that became my forum.
Wow, that was your form. So you did party with the money. You were like a young party guy. I'm sure that was pretty tempting, that whole $1,000.
Well, yeah. Our first sponsor gave us $323, I think, after that. But I pretty much, it was a startup. If I left it alone, it was going to die. So it was not able to breathe on its own, and it took about almost 3 years to really get it to stabilize. So it was my startup event.
Did it look like it does today with a forum with doing what we call deep dives and presentations? Was it very structured back then?
Forum was the backbone and always has been. would say always will be. So that was the first thing that we had was form training. So, we would have our form meeting, and then we would have our board meeting, and then we would have our chapter event all in the same night.
Now, if I go back to the decision when you were seeking a community of people that was like you,
I wanted to meet entrepreneurs.
Right. You wanted to be around people that were trying some stuff that's new. You probably, like all of us, feel pretty lonely in entrepreneurial space.
Yeah.
Unless you have other entrepreneurs, like you can't hang out with your team, right? Other people that you could hang out with doing a regular job. There's just not a lot in commonality, is there?
No, I thought I was doing pretty well, and then I went to my first event.
Humbled?
I was quite humbled. One of the first guys I met, I was sitting there, and this is probably 94 by then. So this guy's got a long hair and kind of a ragged T-shirt on, and big glasses, and he's typing away on something. And we started talking. I'm like, so what do you do? He says, 26 software companies. I'm like, that was Brad Feld. He's I was like, wow, the people really got it. They've got a lot going on here. So there was a lot to learn. I knew it was going to be a place that I could grow and learn for a long time. So it was exciting.
I definitely want to dive in deeper in that story. And that's not why we're here today, but that story in and of itself could go on for a long time because, there's probably been major transition from how the format worked and the kind of support you got from global versus what it's like today. Because there's so many, we have 17,000. You started when we had 600. It's such a wild ride that we have been on. A lot of lessons there.
Yes. And I got outvoted to grow the chapter when we were still, I think we were probably 15 or 20 members.
Wow.
And
that was enough. Huh?
I got outvoted to grow it. Everybody was like, no, we want to keep this, small and intimate. And the international board was giving me all kinds of hell about it because Nashville was just stuck and not growing. So, but that eventually changed because we had amazing people come through afterwards.
That's awesome. Well, the reason here today is to talk about the decision, and that is a moment in time when entrepreneurs are left wanting something to change. There's something in their life that isn't working, and it's causing us lack of sleep. Maybe it causes us to use other substances. Maybe it's maybe it affects our family life, or maybe we just get fat because we are stressed, right? I was listening to a Gino Wickman, founder of EOS, wrote Traction. He spoke about this book called Driven, and it talks about 10% of the people have a gene, the entrepreneurial gene is built in within them. And it's both a blessing and a curse for us. And that is, we are driven, and that driven gene causes us to have addictions and have all these other things that kind of a calamity of our lives that we just cause to ourselves, right? And the reason Eric and I are here today is we have found ourselves in many different types of decisions and find it quite fascinating. How do people make decisions? I have a laundry list of decisions that I need to make that I am struggling with. And that's what Form helps us with. And we all have been in Form and heard the entrepreneur tell that same freaking presentation or deep dive over and over, and no decisions have been made. And so we want to help support how to do a proper deep dive, how to get help from Form when you need it. And so maybe it will help you make a decision, or just kick the can down the line and let the decision happen for itself, which it most often does. Sometimes you let that decision go and it will go. It will make itself. But your challenge that you had. If you walk us through your story.
So I had been starting a lot of different kinds of companies for a long time. And when I was at Medicare.com, I learned a lot there. And so every time I had exited a project I was working on, I always felt, and I still feel like this, I don't feel like I've ever reached my potential. And when I look at why, I felt like the main thing is that I lacked a technical partner. That because I'd had some partners, and then I'd done some projects without partners. I like having partners, but I needed a technical partner, and I spent a lot of years trying to recruit somebody from Silicon Valley out here, and that never really worked. So finally, in 2017, I had a one-word mission statement that was unlimited, and that was to live all of 2017 and not limit myself. And the first thing I did was I was limited at the time to find the right technical partner because of where I lived. And I love Nashville. This is my home, but it's not the technical hub. So I moved to San Francisco and started to embed myself into the startup scene there. And that set me on the course to eventually finding the partner I was looking for. So it actually took 2.5 years, even living there, because a lot of the people I found already had a project, or they had already exited something, and they weren't interested in grinding it from a complete startup again. But eventually I became a co-founder of Silicon Valley Blockchain Society, and which was an investor network for blockchain infrastructure projects. And that they asked me to sit on to oversee all the deal flow for the companies that were coming through looking for funding. So we had investors come to one location every month to hear their pitches. And I don't like reading pitch decks and reading, all that. So I just told them, I said, look, I'll do that. I can pick the teams. I can look at that, but I don't want to read pitch decks all day. So you guys give me an analyst, and you all tell me the ones you want to do, the projects you want to do. I'll go get those deals done. So we ended up, I don't remember we probably ended up doing 17 deals or so that ended up in that. But my hidden reason for taking that position was I wanted to see the founders coming through, because I thought I might find who I'm looking for. And sure enough, that happened. And that was a guy named Brian Sager came through, and Brian was quite intelligent and interesting, and he stood up and he presented to everybody, and only 2 people in the room, I think, understood what he said. And that was, one was a physicist, and the other was a multi-billionaire technology Bitcoin investor. And the 2 of them understood, and they were blown away, and everybody else was like me didn't quite get it. And so that's, entrepreneurs always take the road of most resistance. So I wanted to go after something I completely did not understand. So that is where it started. Our first meeting was 4 hours, and it was supposed to be about, what it led to was I thought he needed somebody to help him tell a story. And what happened was he invented a very different kind of search engine without getting too technical. But he had a lot of breakthroughs, and his customers were, at the time were like Shell Oil, Singularity University, companies like that. The real breakthroughs that he had, one was the ability to store a tremendous amount of information and recall it. So I've got a quadrillion document pairs on a server that is called semantic search. And so anyway, let's see, we ended up, what I realized was he'd already raised $7 million. and then gotten $2 million from the National Research or National Science Foundation. And he just didn't have a financial model or a sales strategy to really go out and grow his business. So I spent a long time getting to know him. He was very slow to trust. He was a research scientist, and he came from the pharmaceutical industry. And so we spent, COVID, I spent about almost a year. We bought the company. I ended up raising $7 million from their existing investors to recap the company and then go out under a new model and start onboarding customers. We had a lot of work to do there. We had to raise money, and I just started the money raising process, and we were going to market in May of 2021, and Brian passed away unexpectedly. I was quite not prepared for that. He had some comorbidities, other conditions, but in the middle of COVID, everybody was on lockdown. And anyway, when he died, I got left with 600,000 lines of production code that I knew nothing about. So, and we had spent every day together for quite a while. So he became, this was the only person I talked to, other than my wife now. This is the only person I talk to every day, with doing this. So it was quite a loss, not just for me, but for the world. A lot of people, when I watched him present to other scientists, I saw their response, and I knew that he had something special that was very hard to describe. So it's easier now with ChatGPT out. We were having early discussions with OpenAI about our technology, but eventually what we built was the ability to assign a credibility score to content. So, and that's, it's not about, it would be a fact-checking tool, but a lot of companies didn't work to it.
So let's go back there for a minute, because, you lost someone you cared about. So it's in a partner. And, I go back to when I think about my run in the software world. I'm the sales guy. Me and you are kind of the same. We're like biz dev kind of people. We can talk the talk, right? But the nerd stuff, like, I can get along with them, but I have no idea what's going on. And I could see that desire to find someone that you really trust to take care of the technology, and then to find this person, build a relationship. What did the day feel like when you got that news? Was it a complete shock, or was he in the hospital? What was that like?
Well, I was out in the middle of the Sahara Desert with a bunch of burners, and
oh, that happened during Burning Man?
No, it didn't. It was a bunch of burners that a friend of mine bought 200 acres out in the middle of the desert to go have parties and not be disturbed because the world was locked down.
Wow.
So
create your own country, right?
Yeah. So I went and I flew back to San Francisco and rented a big RV and strapped a unicorn skull on the front of the RV and drove.
So walk us through. So you find out that night when you're arriving?
That morning.
That morning when
I got up, and his wife called me, and I didn't answer because I was just waking up, and then I thought, well, that's weird, and then I saw a call from Brian, and I'm like, okay, well, I answered. She was calling me from his phone, and and then she told me.
Man.
So it was very emotional. The whole next 24 hours was
imagine.
I knew the company was over, but I wasn't going to accept that. I didn't even want to think about it. I just kept thinking, that I did not know what I was going to do. I was completely,
You have grief.
I was
Yeah.
very emotional.
Yeah. And so when did you go from, the grief stage to the stage of, what's next?
It took a little while. I eventually came back and had a, emergency forum, and it was, I was too emotional to even present, right? It was just, everybody knew the path that I'd been on. So, but at that point, I needed someone that knew me to tell me what I needed to do. I was too emotional to make any really good decisions. So,
What was it? What was the actual presentation about? Was it about going forward, next steps? What was really the question that you were debating?
last opener was Brian died. So, what do I need to do to secure the code that I know nothing about? He had all the keys, all the access to servers and everything else. And, so that I just needed to know how to think through what I needed to do in order to,
Did you have customers at the time?
no. We had any customers that he had we took off because we were going back to market on an internal or a residual revenue model, for a SaaS product. So, I'd literally, just created the first two, videos that were going to be our first campaign to explain, what we were selling. And Brian never got to see those because I finished them. I literally had just finished them before I went out to the desert with this group.
Did you have a team?
We had, we had advisors. We took it when I bought the company, we just took it down to the bare essentials with Brian and myself. And in order to get the product, in a way that we could describe it. Right. So anyway, it took a while. We were experimenting. Oddly enough, the messaging we ended up with, this was turned into a decision tool. So our hook point was we help companies make billion-dollar decisions because very big companies were making very billion-dollar decisions based on 2% of the available information, and they didn't even know it. So
it's. You would think a computer would make the decision based on data, right? We make decisions based on emotion, typically, right? If we could learn to make decisions based on data, we would be amazing, but we just struggle because we have someone on the team who's the sacred cow that we're trying to protect and et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
I could see how that would be, companies would need that. But so take us back to that. You give the presentation, and what was the ask? Were you looking for feedback?
tell me what to do.
You were just like, what's next?
Tell me what to do.
And this is probably, I would imagine, you've gone through these journeys of different companies. A lot of people don't know this, by the way. You had one of the most successful sales of a web domain up to that moment, right?
That was a 8th largest domain sale in history at the time.
And that was Medicare.com?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So 4.8 million.
And you've tried other companies, obviously, since then. And for it to go and spend this much effort, this much energy in this search, moving yourself to another place, and to see this, like, literally stands in your way. I mean, without his access to the code, you don't have a company. Am I reading that right?
Well, without Brian, we don't. Yeah. So that was he was 165 IQ. So that was I think Einstein was 160. So he he always we talked about this possibility. I'm like, what happens, it's what happens if you get hit by a bus talk. And is, we did some things really right. The way that we planned, but we did some things, not so right. We didn't, when I asked him, I said, what happens if you get hit by a bus? And he's like, well, you got to find 3 people from 3 different industries that don't know anything about each other. So, and I was, machine learning and natural language processing and swarm mathematics.
So you go to your form. What was the feedback you got?
Well, I came out with a plan, and that's what I needed. So the priorities were secure the code. That was the first thing. I had to get into the servers and get access to all the code, and then have all of it backed up. So I was very lucky there. I brought in a world-class hacker, so that was able to get into everything and then download and back up and secure. So,
and once you got that, was it that you just couldn't tell us what happened?
Which part?
Was it just literally you couldn't find anybody to be Brian and take over, or was there no documentation, or what?
Oh, there's documentation. Well, yeah, I couldn't find anybody to be Brian. I couldn't find 3 people to be Brian. His background, he changed careers every 10 years because he felt like that was, as a scientist, that's what he liked doing, I guess. But he developed vaccines for the flu virus as part of that, and he had he built a company called Nano Solar. He raised $600 million in that, and did really well. But and so I mean, he graduated from MIT in 2 years. He graduated from Harvard in 2 years, and then he went to Stanford and got his PhD in swarm intelligence.
So you have this plan. You're putting the plan into action. So tell us what transpired.
Well, I got all this code secured, and then we may have talked about this before, but I'm not very good at giving up. It's actually a problem, I think. So,
well, it is in our DNA as driven entrepreneurs. If we gave up, right? Like most of the things we do would not exist, right?
Yeah, I can. Yes, this is true. And I remember Brian looking at me going, "You can't do this without me." And I'm like, "Man, I would never want to do it without you." And but what he was really saying was that, he always told me I wasn't paranoid enough. He had been in Silicon Valley for 30 years as a scientist, so he's been through a lot. And he wasn't very trusting. His developers didn't know each other. They developed different things, and then he would connect everything together. So it was wow. It was quite technical.
So replacing that master architect would be a tall order, it sounds like, especially in that space.
Yeah. Yep.
So you get this plan, you're putting into motion, you're discovering this. You're discovering that this. How long did you go from that? You got the code locked down to searching, and before you were like I assume, were you in another position of a decision to go back to form and say, "Well, guys, what do I do?"
Yeah, it was. I probably, in hindsight, I know I should have just shut it all down then, but I just, for the sake of Brian and Brian's dream and his estate, I was pretty clear on how to get where we needed to go, but I wasn't clear on how to do it without him. So, yeah, so that's, I continued to pay, the biggest expense we had was paying for the servers to keep the application running. And, the problem is that the only people that got excited about this were PhDs and other scientists. That's who got really excited about it. Getting everybody else excited was.
It was hard to explain.
It's hard to explain. It's a semantic search. So it's a different it's a different what Google does is precision search, and that's when you know what you're looking for, that's where you go, and they're the best at it. But you use keywords to find it. What we do is called recall search, and that's what do you do when you don't know what you're looking for. So we do put in an entire document, and it self-assembles everything related to that from in 120 languages.
Was this a challenge you brought back to Form to ask what's next, or?
Well, yes, yeah, and it's kind of one of those things when people are trying to share from experience, and I know they don't, it's, they have experiences of loss, but I just think I was just kind of emotional about it, and then I think I wasn't very realistic about. I thought I could find somebody that could figure out a lot of it, but and then the real secret sauce, like we were just issued a patent in January. And
oh, wow.
So that ultimately the decision became shut it down and file for a patent, and it's a Hail Mary.
And that's what you have today.
And that's what we have today. Yeah. That's like, I've just spent a month in, back in Silicon Valley again.
Oh, wow.
Talking to people out there about this.
So it could turn out to be something.
Knock on wood. It's, it might be, it might be. Well, the thing about it is when we were having all of our discussions with OpenAI about ChatGPT, Brian ended the discussions and said, when this comes out, it's going to be amazing, and it's not going to be accurate. And we already have a tool that fixes.
Wow.
So that was our plan, to let them go live, and then we would plug into it. And when the info comes out, we generate a credibility score and send it back with suggestions on how to improve the score.
Now, if we go back to what I assume the actual decision for you was, how do I decide what to do with something that I have a ton of sunk costs in? And that is such an influence on everything we do, especially if it takes a long time to get a return on the investment.
Yeah.
And then how do you reconcile, other than the fact, obviously, this is all you can do, but was that a factor in the decision, or was there another factor that maybe I'm miss? This
is where not knowing when to throw in the towel. Turning it off was, to me, that was just too final. So I just kept feeding the beast, and then eventually, you gotta give it.
Now, was there, once you made the decision to turn it off, did you have some relief there?
No.
No, it never reconciled for you.
I'm still dealing with it, I think. But now I'm just, the self-talk is more around not letting that be a distraction. And I know that Brian wouldn't want me doing that, but it's just, I don't know if what he built will, I don't know, until they have a quantum computer available to everybody. I'm not sure that, I'm not sure how soon somebody's going to come up with a way to put in a quadrillion document pairs to do semantics.
Well, regardless of that, so what did Bill learn?
Less than I've already learned before, but I just keep sticking myself in the eye with a stick over, I guess. So,
well, isn't that true for all of us?
Yeah.
What's the lesson though?
The lesson is probably that failure is part of it.
Part of it, right?
It is a big part of it. And if you if failing bothers you, go get a damn job.
Yeah.
So, but it's still embarrassing. It's when you share your dreams with your friends, and we've got a tool that can bust fake. I mean,
Right. This dreams and possibilities is what we're selling. Sometimes we often tell stories to our friends and family because secretly deep down, we want someone to help encourage us. We want someone that gives us some hope that, yes, because it is literally you close your mind and you imagine what it could be, and to actually see it happen in front of you is amazing. But there's a lot of nuances to what could actually make it work. And you're battling the biggest beast in the industry. But go back to lots of things now. You said a couple of things. You had a conversation with Brian and he said, you can't do it without me. If you could go back to your former self, what would you coach yourself? Was that like, do you in your mind have that as a sign of like, well, maybe I should have, well, what is there anything that kind of shows up for you?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think success sometimes is just failure turned inside out. And that if I could go back and talk to myself, I'd be like, dude, shut it down, take what you learned and get on to what you know how to do, because it took me a long time to decide what to go do. And that's, ultimately, I go back to my roots. That's what happens when this happens. So back to.
Are there any similarities between that decision and decisions that you made in the past to finally let something go? You said you had difficulty with letting go. Are there any similarities that you've learned?
I've done it before, but I was. I almost went into the, look, at the end of the day, I know how to target an audience and develop a message and draw them into a call to action and convert them to a customer. And I've done it in 24 different product categories. So, in that process, I forgot that this is experimentation, a process of experimentation. And sometimes, I would almost went in the in vitro market because I was building a network of in vitro clinics, and then that took me into drones. To answer your question, drones. That's that. When I got into the drone market and started building an application there, and we failed in the development because I didn't have a technical partner. That's when I said, I'm going to San Francisco. So that's, and I kept feeding that. I got this amazing brand with 500 below that, I went down to Necker Island, and I was the first one to take a drone. I think I was one of the first people to take a drone down to Necker Island and recorded Richard Branson's home with a drone everywhere. So I got all kinds of attention around that, but I never got the business off the ground. So
It's part of it.
I couldn't make the application work. So that's, and then I moved on.
Bill, what are you working on now?
So I'm going back to my roots. So I've built a full service customer acquisition agency, which is really becoming a full service customer acquisition systems. I'm taking what I used to do. And then when I started going back to, that's why I wanted to find a technical partner. I just take what I knew how to do with developing, acquisition channels and apply that to my own product. So, I kept doing it for other people, and they did really well, and after two companies, our team had taken two companies to 100 million and one from 20 to 600 million in 24 months. And then when they transacted, we got nothing because we didn't have any of it. So anyway, I'm going back to that. And then I realized as I started piecing back everything I used to do, all of the AI that's out there now, everything. I mean, it is
It is a remarkable time to be alive to do marketing.
what you can do with a small amount of people is is unbelievable. So I think what I'm coming out with is human augmentation of AI. So it's humans making AI smart, and we can just do it faster and better.
So if there's an entrepreneur out there in this very similar struggle of the decision, how would they reach out to Bill?
How would they reach out to me?
Yeah, how would they reach out to you?
Well, I'm on LinkedIn.
Awesome.
I'm on LinkedIn. I never check Facebook much, but I am on LinkedIn. I'm on Instagram. I'm still on LinkedIn. So you can reach out to me there, or DM, direct message me on Facebook.
Awesome.
That's another way to do it.
Bill, Kimberlin, thank you for your time and energy. Thank you for being the founder.
Well, thank you for being a member. And
Member number one, this was Bill Kimberlin here sharing a story with The Decision. If you haven't taken a moment to subscribe to us on Spotify or iTunes or whatever tool you use to consume a beautiful podcast, thank you, Bill, for
having me. I appreciate it.
Being on here with us.
Yes,
and
sir. Thank you.
We'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening to the Decision Podcast by Nashville EO. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.